general is a little bit of an underrated item in this format. There's so much tailwind that having some way of like getting above matching that I think is a nice thing to have. And we see 3 Pokemon who really don't want to be hit with Earthquake next to a Garchomp.
I was going to say, shout outs to Chuppa for getting Director Clavel's Palmod. That's a very post-game content Pokemon there, but more importantly, we'll be leading it alongside of Golden Go against the Scarf Garchomp and the opposing Golden Go. So definitely some opportunity to see how speeds break down here.
Yeah, and it's sort of a tricky turn again, because both players know that Choice Scarf is there. This is not best of 1 closed team sheet, so you're really going to lock into the Earthquake. Probably some thoughts that perhaps there is a Corviknight in the back, so you try to get like ultra cute and catch it with electric type attack, perhaps. Interesting first turn here with both sides having some options.
For sure, and the other thing that's interesting as well is that I think both these trainers could decide to just play very, very passively here and go immediately for a nasty plot, which is a strategy that we see a lot of Golden Go players try and weave in when they think they have the opportunity. Alberto will take this opportunity to terrastalize that Golden Go into its steel typing, going to actually not get flinched by that fake out as that's going into the Garchomp. Rough Skin dealing a little bit of recoil damage there. That was actually Chuppa's Golden Go that terrastalized, went immediately for Make It Rain, and that Garchomp is gone.
Yeah, no more Earthquake now. Going to have to take an attack in return here, but yeah, it's a pretty good trade. I think for just a little bit of damage from the Rough Skin, can't complain. And from the Life Orb, hurting himself.
I mean, you are giving up your Focus Sash, unfortunately, with that recoil damage, but Alberto goes and targets down the opposing Golden Go with Shadow Ball, potentially assuming there wouldn't have been a terrestrialization that turn. So
yeah, would have been a knockout with that.
Yeah.
Instead, well, turn you feel pretty good about it for Chuppa, right? Knock out one Pokemon, vastly weaken another, and as an aggressive terrestrialization, turn 1, game 1, just going for it. But you're getting a lot out of it. However, now the Whimsicott on the field has the option of tailwinding here. Could try to encore Palmon into the fake out, although I think it's likely that that's not going to work. Get some cool options here, but Alberto's really got to take some ground back now, where you probably is the Dondozo combination in the back, so you got to prepare for that situation while also catching up in the game.
Yeah, one thing about Choice Scarf as a lead is that I think you're always expecting to switch it out within 1 turn or have it be knocked out within 1 turn. So losing the Garchomp this early on isn't necessarily as much of a step back as it could seem on paper. That being said, though, Chuppa is taking a couple of steps here, going to double switch into the Dondozo and Tatsugiri combination. So we'll only have 1 Pokemon on the field for the time being and will not be able to switch Dondozo out, as that's how this whole thing works. But is going to, I don't know, this is an interesting double switch here for sure.
Yeah, I mean, definitely maybe causes Dondozo to get out in the field boosted a little quicker than Alberto was hoping for. I think a lot of playing Dondozo well is kind of keeping your opponent off guard, but potentially going to take 1 attack here. It'll be the Make It Rain. It will resist this attack, and Tatsugiri happily avoiding it from the stomach. And yeah, not too much damage there.
Not too much damage at all, and Golden Go will be taking a special attack drop on top of that. And we do see the leftovers activate on this Dondozo to bring a little bit of that health back. So overall, a great switch for Chuppa.
Yeah, when all said and done there, kind of lost the damage trade there with the Life Orb versus the leftovers. And I really love how aggressive that is from Chuppa. I think one really important thing when you're playing against Dondozo is that you want to make sure that you're kind of ready for it once it comes out, because it does so much damage while you're repositioning your board. I think Alberto probably wasn't expecting it yet. And we do see Skeledirge, so there was no option for Corviknight in the back. Instead, the unaware battle between these 2 Pokemon.
Moonblast will do a little bit of chip damage, but that Skeledirge showed up just in time to take an Earthquake. It is going to be super effective, but it's not going to do a lot of damage because of that unaware ability. It works 2 ways. Not only is the Pokemon attacking you unaware of your stat changes, it's also unaware of your stat changes when you're taking damage.
Yeah, and I was going to say it takes it really well.
Yeah.
I had just been thinking before I saw the damage there. I was like, one of the tough things about how quick Chuppa was to get that out in the field is now you have to switch into the Earthquake without having the opportunity to terrestrialize Skeledirge first to remove that weakness to Earthquake. Didn't really matter, where still not even close to a 2-hit KO. And yeah, you see why Skeledirge is on the team right now.
Yeah.
Not such a popular Pokemon, but when Dondozo is such an important team in the metagame to counter you, you can afford to have a Pokemon on your team whose main job is to help deal with stuff like this.
I feel bad for this Whimsicott, though, as Moonblast did not do a lot of damage, and it almost feels like it's stuck out on the field for the time being. We will see the Terastallization come through from Alberto, and like you were hinting at, it is Skeledirge turning into that Fairy type, so no more weakness to Earthquake.
Yeah, and hey, Whimsicott might not be in such a bad spot, right? It's not going to get too much done, but, what Pokemon does against Dondozo, but, its support moves can still be useful here. Sunny Day going to weaken any potential Water-type attacks. They're now both immune to Dragon-type attacks, and, if we see any Torch Songs, I'm sure Skeledirge will appreciate the sign.
Here comes another Earthquake, but it does even less damage to Skeledirge this turn. Torch Song won't be doing super effective damage by any means, but gets the critical hit, and I think more importantly for this matchup, will be boosting the special attack of Skeledirge by one stage, utilizing its signature move to really start ramping up its stats, kind of like we see from Archaludon or the King Gambits in the format right now.
Yeah, I think that's a scary thing about this, right? It's not really about Skeledirge versus Dondozo. You're going to assume that Skeledirge was the one who's going to come out on top of the matchup between these two particular Pokemon. The problem is once that happens, Alberto's likely going to be pretty far behind in this game. So can Skeledirge do enough that once Dondozo faints, it can kind of just win the game on its own? And this is a combination of Pokemon that really is going to struggle against Skeledirge.
Yeah, I really love, too, how Skeledirge can just sit on the field now and keep going for Torch Songs. It does have Shadow Ball and Slack Off as other options here, but really, as long as it stays healthy, you don't feel pressured to use Slack Off, and the more Torch Songs at this point just means you're going to have that much more momentum going into the late game, especially since we know Golden Go's still in the back for Chuppa.
Yeah, and it's probably already at the point where, one Torch Song would knock out Palmot, one Torch Song would knock out Golden Go. So he's actually not that far from the point where, Skeledirge kind of just takes care of this one. Unfortunately, having to switch the Golden Go into the Earthquake kind of slow down the rate at which Skeledirge loses its friend Whimsicott. Instead, Golden Go going down, and, we see the cost of this ramp.
A safe switch there, though, as Whimsicott will be able to come back out onto the field and provide more Tailwind support and potentially more weather support later on in this match. Shadow Ball will bring that Dondozo down into the red, and after another round of leftovers, both these trainers will have an opportunity to switch their Pokemon, Alberto will have the opportunity to switch his Pokemon around, and with Whimsicott coming back out onto the field, I almost have to assume we're going to see it go for Tailwind immediately.
Yeah, I think I really like how he played that, because he knows he's going to wind up in a situation where he's got Soul Skeledirge having to kind of 1v4. I think he'll probably pick up a knockout this turn, and he's going to want the speed advantage against as many of these Pokemon as he can, avoid taking a bunch of unnecessary hits. So at least this ensures he has the maximum possible Tailwind as Skeledirge tries to hero mode this game for him in game 1.
One potentially final Earthquake from this Dondozo will get that knockout against the Whimsicott. So it is just this one Skeledirge versus all 4 Pokemon on Chuppa's side of the field. Will use Torch Song to deal that final amount of damage to Dondozo to pick up the KO. So now Chuppa will still have the Tatsugiri on the field as it finally makes its reappearance alongside of the Golden Go in the back and then also Palmon.
Yeah, so Tatsugiri probably going to struggle to do too much damage here. 2 of its attacks are Dragon-type, not going to work at all on this now Fairy-type Skeledirge. Muddy Water doesn't love the rain, but I do think Icy Wind could be meaningful here. The one thing that doesn't do less damage than it does by default now, but it could help negate that Tailwind. Palmont, we've already seen the fake out from it, at least could burn a turn of this Tailwind. Try to eventually get in a situation where maybe Golden Go is the one who deals the final blow, or even attack from this Palmont, and probably going to do a decent amount of damage, though you'd assume this Skeledirge is trained to be pretty physically bulky based on how we've seen it take these Earthquakes.
I don't think we'll see it this turn, but do you think there's potential for a Revival Blessing? I mean, the fake out plus Icy Wind here I think is very safe, but I would be tempted, especially with the Tatsugiri still around, to try and do that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any reason not to do it, right? Although, maybe the reason not to do it is you may not even need to.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's fair, that's fair.
But I think it's a good point, and something to keep in mind as we look at this set, right, where you don't necessarily only need to knock Dondozo out once. There is certainly the option to do it again, although I think Chuppa has several different ways he could probably close this first game out.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, on the one hand, Revival Blessing would be cool. It's really the signature move of Palmont, but Double Shock there would close it out. Another Icy Wind or 2 from that Tatsugiri would close it out, and that's exactly why we see Alberto lock in forfeit, giving Chuppa game number 1.
So I think really what happened in the game, fantastic turn one from Chuppa, right?
Yeah.
Like eventually Skeledirge can beat up Dondozo, but like you need more positive Pokemon traits to actually turn that into a win because, yeah, I mean, Soul Skeledirge is not quite as powerful as Soul Dondozo. You know, it doesn't have the boost to its defensive stats or to its speed naturally that Dondozo gets from Commanders. So even though they can kind of fight to a draw, it's a bit of a Pyrrhic draw. I didn't read about that one in literature class.
I didn't either, so you're on your own for that one. I think the other cool thing about this team as well was just Chuppa was very comfortable using Earthquake after Earthquake after Earthquake. I think a lot of times when trainers run Dondozo, they might try and get those order-ups in, but it just wasn't really an option thanks to the Fairy typing, and I think that worked in his advantage, because even though Earthquake wasn't dealing a ton of damage, it still out-ramped that Skeledirge and provided just the right amount of pressure to give him on the advantage.
Yeah, and I think kind of Alberto said, I feel like he kind of has to use a pretty similar combination of Pokemon. I mean, I think bringing Corviknight is an option, but all it's really going to do is like survive while Dondozo's out there, which maybe that's enough. It's just a matter of like, well, can you still get to that position efficiently where even though Chuppa hadn't seen Alberto's fourth Pokemon when he sent out Dondozo, he knew it was going to be Skeledirge, right? Because you have to bring that in this matchup. So he had all the information of like, all right, I'm pretty safe just to Earthquake my way through this one. I think that the team preview element was going to be really important where Chuppa led well. He knew exactly what he needed to do there. And again, you know, we see Chuppa's experience on this archetype looked like a kind of like very aggressive way to play the beginning of the game, but he kind of won it right there where I didn't really have to do anything. We even saw Dondozo get suffer a critical hit the other direction, didn't really make a difference. So pretty decisive victory. Yeah,
looking at Alberto's Pokemon, I mean, if you're worried about Earthquake, you do have two Pokemon that will dodge damage by nature of being flying type, so that would be the Corviknight and the Dragonite. I don't think you can bring the Dragonite in this matchup just because you'd have to Terrastalize it, which it felt like the Fairy typing on that Skeledirge was so important. I don't think you can give that up necessarily. And then Dragonite's weak to order up. You could try Corviknight. It certainly would be on the field longer than the Garchomp.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dragonite over Garchomp would be an option so that you can lead two Pokemon that are immune to Fake Out. But we see a little different path. Instead, both sides going for their Tailwind Golden Go mode.
And because Talonflame is still at full health on this turn number one, it will get access to its Gale Wings ability, which means it will be using Tailwind in the same priority tier as Whimsicott. So you might look at this board state and think to yourself, Whimsicott Tailwinds, Golden Go outspeeds, goes for that Shadow Ball like you saw in turn one. Not as free this time around.
Especially because Chuppa doesn't have to Terrastalize, or he can Terrastalize rather, where Alberto, assuming Dondozo in the back end, kind of has to save it for Skeledirge.
Yeah.
So, and we've seen that Chuppa's Golden Go is faster. So I think there's a lot of elements of this turn that are advantage. Plus, again, he really just needs to trade positively. So if he wanted to, there's always the option of just like going for the knockout and the Whimsicott. I think it's probably not worth giving up the free Tailwind, but you know, given how ineffective Golden Go was against Dondozo in the previous game, that's an option too.
Yeah, you do have to watch out as this Whimsicott has access to Encore, so we might see the Talonflame go for a Tailwind and then immediately switch out previously. But in terms of starting things out, Chuppa will be starting things in the same way as game number one, going straight for that Steel-type Terrastalization on the Golden Go, but Alberto making a huge adjustment here, Terrastalizing his own Golden Go.
So a very different plan. Like, Operation Skeledirge didn't go the best. Perhaps hoping that maybe there is no Dondozo this time, or just thinking he has a different solution to it.
Here comes Tailwind from a Whimsicott, and I have a feeling there will not be a second Tailwind close behind, as we know that Brave Bird is going to bring Whimsicott straight down to its Focus Sash. So while Alberto's Golden Go will be attacking first, we did see from the previous game that Chuppa's own Golden Go could have taken a Shadow Ball. Instead, it Make It Rain will actually almost KO the Talonflame. That does a ton of damage. Chuppa will be able to pick up the KO, though, with his own Make It Rain on the opposing Whimsicott to close out this turn.
Yeah, so once again, we're going to see Chuppa get the Pokemon advantage immediately, but I think it's kind of an interesting spot for Alberto this time. Again, it depends on what's in the back, or like, is there some way you can still handle the Dondozo? I guess potentially Skeledirge can still beat it with how little Earthquake was doing last time. But I think what's critical is, as you mentioned, this is not the Pokemon X and Pokemon Y version of Talonflame. It does need full health to have access to Gale Wings. No longer has priority with either Brave Bird or with Tailwind, so there's now a real path, at least, to never letting Chuppa get a Tailwind up. And letting this Golden Go pick up a knockout, but if you make it rain again, you're going to wind up at -2, likely needing to switch out, although I guess it doesn't matter if it's Dondozo.
It doesn't, but I think another option to consider here is that Chuppa could try and start to stall out some of the Tailwind turns on the opposing side of the field. This Talonflame does have access to Protect. I know in previous formats in particular, you just don't have the room for it. And while you want to try and be smart sometimes and not just click the double Protect, in this particular situation where your opponent can get the double knockout pretty comfortably, I like this play from Chuppa. You know, maybe double Protect for sure this turn, potentially even roll the additional Protects the following turn, and just hope that that buys you enough time to get through Tailwind so that when Dondozo does make the field, it can really start threatening that Skeledirge immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a pretty low-risk play.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, you're giving up a potential nasty plot on the other side, but I think that the upside of that is low, and this is likely going to wind up in a fight with an unaware Dondozo anyway. We do see Alberto just goes for the attack, so nothing's really going to happen on this turn. And one of the weaknesses of Skeledirge is even though it is a boosting Pokemon, it needs to do damage in order to boost. So unless it's going to attack the Golden Go here, which would be pretty hype, but a little crazy, not what we see here. And Chuppa gets rid of one turn of the Tailwind without really having to pay. This becomes the more interesting turn now, right? Where you immediately go to Dondozo. If you do immediately go to Dondozo, which slot do you go for? Or can you successfully line up Tatsugiri with the Torch Song to negate Skeledirge's turn for a second time in a row? I think that makes a lot more sense to me than the double. So we'll have to see which side Alberto guesses as he tries to catch Dondozo with a little extra damage.
Yeah, this is the tricky part about this turn too, right? Is that I feel like sometimes when you switch Pokemon in, there's always like a science to it. You know, you want to send this Pokemon into this spot so it resists this damage. Knowing that one of the Pokemon just kind of disappears after it takes the field, and knowing that Unaware basically makes it so you don't have to worry too much about stat changes or whatever, like, I feel like you just have to guess here. And you're either going to guess right or guess wrong. So we saw, since we're seeing Chuppa's perspective, that the Tatsugiri is coming in on the left, which means Dondozo is coming in on the right. So the question is, did Alberto also predict this going into the turn?
Yeah, 'cause he really wants a single target attack with both of these, ideally now, make it rain a lot worse than Shadow Ball. Can ignore his own special attack drop if he picks the right target. So we'll have to see, are the attacks going behind door number 1 or door number 2?
And unfortunately, we do have to wait a moment here as Dondozo, as it does best, slows things down as it gets all of those sharp boosts, and Shadow Ball targeted the Tatsugiri slot. Torch Song targeted the Tatsugiri slot. What an incredible read from Chuppa.
That's a huge read there. Dondozo much healthier than it would otherwise be. Now have the option, if he wants to, of protecting again to start the Trick Room, or just going for the Earthquakes, feeling like, hey, you know, we're going to have to trade blows here, so it doesn't really matter if Tailwind is still active or not.
I mean, that's the thing, right? In game number 1, we saw just how little damage Alberto was doing to the Dondozo. And yeah, Earthquake's not going to be getting any one-hit knockouts in this position, but I feel like because you're not taking a lot of damage in return, that's okay.
Yeah, it's actually weirdly, I think, better to not try to stall at the Tailwind, because really what you want to do, all that really matters is getting as many Earthquakes out as you can to whittle down Skeledirge's partners before it takes out eventually Golden Go. But this time we do see the Corviknight adjustment. So it is Corviknight showing up over Garchomp, as we kind of expected, at least able to reduce the effectiveness of this Earthquake strategy.
Yeah, unlike the Tatsugiri, who's just hiding out with Dondozo, Corviknight just floats over that Earthquake, and Torch Song will begin the process of getting what I'm assuming is going to be a lot of stat boosts on Alberto's side of the field. Not only do you have Skeledirge now using Torch Song to get those special attack boosts, the Corviknight's probably going to have to go for a bulk up or two before it starts going on the offensive.
Yeah, I mean, its stat boosts aren't going to matter until Dondozo's knocked out, where again, the Unaware Madness has really picked up. But I think it puts Alberto in a more realistic spot, right? At this time, at least, there is a reasonable path toward him knocking out Dondozo without just completely being out of Pokemon. However, yeah, I mean, unlike last time, we see that Corviknight could be an option, or either there could be an option for order up to increase Dondozo's stats, since it will matter against everyone but Skeledirge. And Skeledirge isn't able to terrestrialize this time, so a super effective Wave Crash is also an option.
Yeah, and I think that if I were Alberto, I'd try and utilize this. It's almost like a bit of a slow moment, right, in the game, because you know it's going to take Dondozo a couple of turns to power through either of these Pokemon. I think that there's a lot of mind games going on here in terms of Chuppa's position. Do you want to go for the KO on the Skeledirge immediately? I would assume that's what Alberto's anticipating with that Protect there. But this Corviknight is going to want to try and find some opportunities to boost its own stats, so it's available in the late game for Alberto. And Order Up will boost this Dondozo's attack by 1 stage. Brave Bird, though, just doesn't do damage.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of words from the game here, and I'm a little questionable. Super effective, critical hit. I mean, it was effective. It was a hit. We're not doing a whole lot of damage, and there's a lot of healing available. Both Corviknight and Skeledirge can heal themselves. It is somewhat a very favorable position for Alberto. It's going to take us a little while, and Corviknight's probably going to get pretty worn down. But with the Citrus Berry and Roost and Slack off on the Skeledirge side, it's going to take a lot for Chuppa to deal with this. And it's a weirdly complicated position, right? Even though both these trainers are very used to these Pokemon, and I think this is, again, exactly what these Pokemon are for at Alberto's team. A strange one.
I am curious, though, at which point Alberto decides to go on the offense with his two Pokemon, because I think he has a bit more of an interesting mind game here where you have to juggle, the slack offs, dealing damage, boosting up your own stats. I love that Shadow Ball into Dondozo because I feel like that's an indication that after maybe one more Torch Song, it'll be at the right amount of damage against that Pokemon, but... Unaware, yes.
But the chip does matter a lot because, really this is all about the position once Dondozo's knocked out, where, again, Alberto has Pokemon where he's going to be able to deal with this Dondozo. However, once he does, there's still 3 healthy-ish Pokemon on Chuppa's side of the field.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a world where he can get Tailwind off this time. Talonflame, even though it doesn't have Gale Winds active, it's just naturally going to be faster than all of the remaining Pokemon. So it's a weird, complicated game. And I'm impressed to see these players navigating it. I would have a headache.
I was just going to ask for Meowscarada to come in from the sidelines with a flower trick.
Can you get some WWE stuff going on here? Or the starter Pokemon are banding together. They're done with this.
The starter Pokemon with the steel type terrestrialization. But yeah, that's the thing though about these Dondozo games, and I do feel like that's a testament to both these trainers, especially when you look at the overall arc of this tournament. This is only round 4. We're going to have Chuppa looking to use every possible minute of this matchup. Imagine doing that for 8 rounds today. Imagine doing it for additional Swiss rounds tomorrow. There's so much time.
Yeah, I think that's why he's one of our players to watch, right? It's not just that he's experienced this team, but there's some unique experiences. Oh no, it's a knockout, a one-hit KO in the Corviknight. It's not unaware, and I think we're all very aware of how powerful this Dondozo has become.
That was a lot of damage. It does take some recoil there, and the nice thing about that recoil is it does put it within KO range from the Shadow Ball. And again, that's just another testament to how talented these trainers are, knowing when to go on the offense, Chuppa making that decision, and Alberto matching it.
Yeah, my man knows his math, and now we're in a very difficult position for Alberto. That Choice Scarf Tatsugiri, naturally going to be the strongest Pokemon in the field. This time there is no sunny day, so even a Muddy Water is potentially very devastating to the other side of the field. Talonflame now can come in. You have a litany of reasonable options, right? You can go for the Tailwind and try to make things easier for the Golden Go on your side of the field. Could just go for a Brave Bird, which would certainly be a self-knockout at this point. I think that's a little dangerous, but hey, you need some more damage perhaps on Skeledirge anyhow. Or you just go for the Protect. I think that's actually overwhelmingly the best choice here.
Yeah, I think that your goal here is to try and deal as much damage as possible with the Tatsugiri before going on the offense with the Talonflame.
Yeah, and I think, realistically, Talonflame, you're only going to get one swing.
Yeah.
So you get more information this way, right? You're probably going to lock in a Muddy Water, can learn if that hits or not. And then also kind of get a feel for how much health these other Pokemon are going to have to try to make a more predictable endgame for your Golden Go. And hey, maybe you get lucky and you get an attack and a Talonflame Protect.
Muddy Water will not hit the opposing Golden Go thanks to that Protect, and will connect with the Skeledirge for an actually super effective hit. Shadow Ball, though, will return fire into that Tatsugiri, bringing it down to just below half its health. I don't think that special defense drop really matters in the grand scheme of things. I think what's more important here is that the Skeledirge would be KO'd by a second Muddy Water, and that's the information that Chuppa was looking for with the Protect.
Yeah, suddenly Tatsugiri is looking like the sweeper here. It's like, hey, you may have knocked out Dondozo bot, but I'm going to deal with this one on my own.
What's really interesting to me here is just how quickly the tides have turned. Everything was so slow with Dondozo, with Unaware, no double Protect to slow things down further. But now all of a sudden, it's just full offense from all these Pokemon. We see Skeledirge get knocked out. We see the Golden Go hanging on with just a little bit of health, but not for long, as Flare Blitz will pick up the KO. And Chuppa Cross winning this round 4 of Swiss 2-0 against Alberto Lara.
Yeah,